Bonjour. C'est une période difficile pour des millions de Canadiens. Les prix sont plus chers à l'épicerie et à la pompe. Les taux d'intérêt augmentent. Notre économie ralentit, comme celle de nos amis et de nos alliés ailleurs dans le monde. Mais le Canada est prêt à affronter ce nouveau défi. Parce que, depuis 7 ans, notre gouvernement renforce le filet de sécurité sociale du Canada. Et aujourd'hui, nous présentons de nouvelles mesures importantes pour améliorer encore davantage ce filet de sécurité sociale et offrir un soutien ciblé aux Canadiens qui en ont le plus besoin. Nous éliminons de façon permanente les intérêts sur les prêts d'études canadiens et les prêts canadiens aux apprentis. Nous créons de nouveaux paiements trimestriels de l'allocation canadienne pour les travailleurs afin de mettre plus d'argent dans les poches de nos travailleurs les moins bien payés plus rapidement. Nous nous assurons que chaque enfant peut voir un dentiste, peu importe combien gagnent leurs parents. Nous aidons les Canadiens à économiser sur les frais de clôture en doublant le crédit d'impôt pour l'achat d'une première habitation. Et nous aidons les jeunes Canadiens à économiser plus rapidement pour une mise de fonds grâce au nouveau compte d'épargne libre d'impôt pour l'achat d'une première maison. Nous offrons un soutien nécessaire aux locataires à faible revenu. Et nous offrons une nouvelle mesure de soutien aux Canadiens qui en ont le plus besoin, en doublant le crédit pour la TPS au cours des 6 prochains mois. Et cet argent va commencer à arriver dans leur compte de banque et dans leur boîte aux lettres dès demain. Aujourd'hui, le Canada a le plus faible déficit et le plus faible ratio de la dette au PIB du G7. Dans notre budget d'avril, nous nous étions engagés à ramener le déficit à seulement 2% du PIB. Aujourd'hui, nous prévoyons qu'il se situera à seulement 1,3% de notre économie de 2,8 000 milliards de dollars. There are 400,000 more Canadians working today than before the pandemic. Our economy is now 103% the size it was before COVID hit. So far this year, our economic growth has been the strongest in the G7. And when we get through the coming global slowdown, with the COVID recession behind us, there is no country in the world better placed than Canada to thrive. The global economy is at a turning point. The green transition is the most significant economic transformation since the Industrial Revolution itself. And we're entering an era of friendshoring, a time when our democratic partners and their most important companies are looking to shift their dependence from dictatorships to democracies. These two transformations represent the most significant opportunity for Canadian workers and Canadian businesses in a generation. Seizing this opportunity is what our April budget invested in, and it is what this fall economic statement invests in as well, with major tax credits for clean technology and clean hydrogen, with the launch of the new Canada Growth Fund, and with other important investments to grow our economy and create good jobs. We know these represent just a down payment on the work that lies ahead to respond to the Inflation Reduction Act and to ensure that Canada remains globally competitive and can lead the way in the global net zero transition. And so, in the months to come, we'll continue to work hard to ensure that Canada is the best place in the world for businesses to invest and create good jobs from coast to coast to coast. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Okay, thanks, Minister. The first question is for David Aiken, Global.
Minister, thanks very much for taking our questions. This is the first budget document that your government has tabled since it was elected in 2015, in which a 5-year forecast is presented for the budgetary balance that finishes with a positive number. And I wonder if that's significant at all. Is that by design, happy accident? Could you just maybe talk about that black number right there at the end of the 5-year forecast?
Yeah, thank you for the question, David. And of course, it is significant. It's by design insofar as it is the result of our consistent and strong investments in Canadians and in the Canadian economy. In particular, I would say it is thanks to Canada's remarkably strong recovery from the COVID recession, which I attribute first and foremost to the resilience of Canadians and to the excellence of Canadian medical professionals, but which I also attribute to the significant support we provided. And thanks to all those things together, there are 400,000 more people working today than before COVID hit. Our economy is 103% the size it was when COVID first hit. That's a really big deal. And if you compare that performance to what has happened in previous recessions, it's a very, very strong recovery. And it is thanks to that strong recovery that we are able to show a strong deficit and debt track.
Okay, Madeleine Blais-Morin, Radio-Canada.
Oui, Madame Freeland, j'ai aussi une question à propos du retour à l'équilibre budgétaire. C'est la première fois depuis que votre gouvernement est au pouvoir que vous évoquez un retour à l'équilibre budgétaire. Mais au moment où vous le dites vous-même, les Canadiens vont faire face à un vent de face. Est-ce que c'est le bon moment d'en parler? Ou vous n'auriez pas dû investir davantage dans les Canadiens?
C'est un peu une surprise pour moi d'avoir une question à notre gouvernement visée à l'idée qu'on n'investit pas assez. Je pense que notre gouvernement investit beaucoup et commençant en 2015, nous avons investi beaucoup et nous continuons dans cet énoncé économique d'automne d'investir. Mais nous le faisons en manière responsable du côté fiscal et aussi nos investissements sont ciblés à la croissance économique. Et c'est grâce à la croissance économique qu'on a dans cet énoncé économique de l'automne une situation fiscale assez forte. Mais je veux ajouter une autre chose. Dans l'énoncé économique de l'automne, dans les discours que j'ai faits il y a 10 jours, j'ai souligné aussi que nous comprenons qu'il y a beaucoup d'incertitudes économiques dans le monde et que la réalité est qu'aujourd'hui, l'économie canadienne est en train de ralentir. Alors, dans l'énoncé économique, nous avons aussi inclus des prédictions basées sur une situation un peu pire économique. Et c'est important de rendre compte qu'il y a beaucoup d'incertitudes et pour cette raison aussi, c'est important de rassurer les Canadiens que l'économie canadienne est fondamentalement très forte et aussi que notre gouvernement, le fédéral, a une capacité fiscale forte qui nous donnera toutes les possibilités d'aider les Canadiens si la situation deviendra plus difficile qu'aujourd'hui.
Catherine Cullen, CBC.
Hello, Minister. You say we're keeping our powder dry. You know that there are a lot of Canadians that won't be helped by the targeted measures in here. So what would you say to them about the idea that the government is holding back, is not helping them at a time when people are struggling to buy food, to pay for the cost of housing?
I think it's a very good question, and it's something that I think about, and to be really candid, I struggle with a lot. I live in a pretty prosperous neighborhood, but not everyone in my neighborhood is doing great. And actually, last weekend, one of my neighbors, a really nice lady, stopped me on the street. Like, people stop me a lot and talk to me about stuff. And she stopped me, and she said she was really glad that bacon was on sale at Walmart. And she bought 6 packs and put 5 in the freezer because she loves BLTs. And she said to me, bacon is just so expensive. I shouldn't have to buy 6 packs of bacon. And what are you going to do to make the price go down? And I think that's a good question, and it's something I agonize over. I am confident that we have struck the right approach in general and in this fall economic statement. And what we're announcing today, what we've been doing throughout, is to strike a balance between necessary compassion and support for Canadians and fiscal responsibility. And we know we need to strike that balance because we know how important it is right now in this economic moment where we find ourselves for the federal government not to pour fuel on the flames of inflation. We really don't want to make the central bank's job harder. We don't want to put the Bank of Canada in a position where it has to raise rates higher and keep them there for longer. That truly would not be a compassionate thing to do. Now, having said all that, there really are measures here that are targeted at the people who need it the most. Those GST checks, they're going to go out tomorrow. And I am not going to claim that they are going to compensate the families who get that money 100% for inflation. That wouldn't be true, and I'm not trying to fool them. But I can tell you, for that neighbor I spoke to who buys 6 packets of bacon at a time at Walmart because they're on sale, $500, that makes a difference. And people are going to be getting that. So that's one thing that's going to be there. The $500 that people are going to get to help them pay the rent, that is meaningful as well. Dental care for kids under 12, 12 and under, whose parents can't afford to take them to the dentist, that's going to help a lot of families too. And, you know, I think it's going to help people who take their kid to the dentist anyway, because you just do. But they really don't have the money to afford it. The other elements that are really important to me, looking at the challenging economic situation Canadians are facing, are the shift to advance payments of the Canada Workers' Benefit. This is really significant. It will expand to 4.2 million the number of hardworking but poorly paid Canadians who get this support. That's a really good thing. And what it also means is, instead of getting the support after they've worked hard all year and struggled, you get that as advance payments. I think this is a really important policy. It rewards people who work hard but don't get paid enough for it. And then finally, the student loans, permanently eliminating the federal interest on student and apprentice loans. We know, all the data shows, that young people are among the people struggling the most right now and among the people the most worried about their future. Eliminating that interest is, I think, really going to help them. I myself remember struggling with interest payments on my student loans, well, with paying back my student loans. And it's a source of huge anxiety if you've ever been in that situation. And I'm really, really glad that we're able to do that.
Émilie Bergeron, de la presse canadienne.
Bonjour, Madame Freeland. Avec la taxe sur le rachat d'actions des sociétés que vous proposez, est-ce qu'il n'y a pas un risque de se rendre moins compétitif par rapport à d'autres pays qui essaient justement d'attirer l'investissement privé?
Non. Je veux souligner que les États-Unis ont mis en place la même taxe. C'est très important parce qu'on doit regarder toujours la situation des impôts aux États-Unis. Et encore une fois, les États-Unis, dans le Inflation Reduction Act, ils ont mis en place la même taxe. La deuxième chose que je veux souligner est que les entreprises ne doivent payer cette taxe s'ils choisissent d'utiliser leurs profits pour les investissements, pour faire les investissements dans leur productivité. Et avec cette taxe, nous voulons encourager les entreprises canadiennes à faire plus des investissements dans leur productivité. Tout le monde sait que un problème pour le Canada, un problème historique, mais un problème qui continue aujourd'hui, c'est qu'on n'a pas assez d'investissements du côté privé dans la productivité. J'espère qu'avec cette mesure, on va encourager les entreprises de ne pas payer le taxe, mais de choisir d'investir cet argent dans leur productivité, dans leurs travailleurs.
Catherine Levesque, National Post.
Hi, Hi, Minister, right here. I had a question about the budgetary windfall because according to your department, you indeed had more revenue to work with. That windfall would be about $30 billion. However, there's also a lot of expenses. I mean, 45% of that windfall was basically spent in policy measures, either since the budget or in this fall economic update. So I was just wondering if that is a fiscally prudent thing to do to spend nearly half of the windfall.
Thanks for the question. And let me start by saying I would never characterize, and I don't characterize, the revenue upside as a windfall. It sounds like Canada somehow won the lottery. That revenue upside represents the hard work of millions of Canadians. It didn't happen by accident. It happened because people struggled through COVID. They kept their businesses going. They kept working and operating. And that's why Canada is in this pretty remarkable position of significantly outperforming our forecasts in the budget in April. You're right. With that upside, we have chosen to invest some of that. The upside is around $30 billion, and we have chosen to invest about $13.4 billion in Canadians today and in our productive capacity going forward. That choice represents a balance that I spoke about in response to the earlier questions. We think we need to strike a balance today between, on the one hand, being fiscally responsible, keeping our powder dry, given the global economic uncertainty, and on the other hand, being compassionate, providing support to those people who need it, to that lady on my street who buys 6 packages of bacon because they're on sale. Those people really do need support. I don't think there are any Canadians who would disagree with that. I really don't think there's anyone who would say it's a bad idea to support more really low-wage Canadians with the Canada Workers Benefit. And then part of that investment is in increasing our productive capacity going forward. And I have to say, I think that's a really good idea. We do need to be investing in growth, and we are.
Ian Bailey, The Globe and Mail.
Minister, your April budget announced a strategic policy review that aimed to find about $6 billion in savings over 5 years and $3 billion annually by 2026-27. The plan's not mentioned today. Can you provide an update on how it's going? And have you asked your ministers to find internal savings before submitting their spending plans?
That's a great question. So that $9 billion, as you say, Ian, it was divided in $6 billion that was supposed to happen later as a result of a review of what we're doing, and $3 billion that we wanted to find sooner, looking at COVID-related and changes related to COVID expenses. That $3 billion we have saved. Actually, we've saved $3.8 billion, and it's in the documents. We can point out to you where it is later on if you'd like. So the COVID-related $3 billion, that was a finance responsibility and which we believed should come at the outset. That's there, and actually we found 3.8. On the $6 billion, that is work which my colleague Mona Fortier is doing. She and I speak about it often, and she speaks with other cabinet colleagues. And we committed to doing it. We will. It's a challenge always, and that's why, quite intentionally, we book those savings in later years to give Mona the time to do the work.
Mia Rapson, the Canadian Press.
Hi, Minister. I'm over here. You're including for the first time some labor market conditions on these tax credits. I'm wondering if you could explain to us why you're doing that, what you're hoping to achieve, and if you have any concerns that the companies you're about to support with this tax credit are not paying fair market wages.
Thank you so much for that question. It is one of the things that I think is the most noteworthy about this fall economic statement. It is a new approach by Canada. Our basic view is if the government is investing in businesses, encouraging them to do things that we need done, encouraging them to increase Canada's productive capacity, which is what these credits do, the hydrogen one, the clean tech one, it is entirely reasonable. In fact, I would say long overdue for us to say, and as you're doing it, you need to be creating good paying jobs for Canadian workers. Because that's the point, right? Like, we want a strong economy. We want great, strong companies. But we don't want them just because that's a good thing. We want them because we want Canadians to have great, well-paying, secure jobs. And particularly when it is government money, all of our money that is being devoted to driving this kind of business growth and creation and investment, I think it makes a lot of sense to say, one of the things we want you to do is be sure to create good, stable, well-paying jobs.
Raymond Filion, TVA.
Bonjour.
Pour la première fois dans le document, le mot récession écrit noir sur blanc, c'est une possibilité. Vous utilisez le mot récession pour la première fois. À combien vous estimez le risque d'une récession et à quoi ça risque de ressembler si ce scénario se concrétise?
Merci pour la question. C'est important d'être franche avec les Canadiens, de dire la vérité. Et la réalité est que l'économie mondiale est en train de ralentir. La réalité est qu'il y a aussi beaucoup d'incertitudes. Et c'est pour cette raison que dans la mise à jour économique, on a deux scénarios. Le scénario de base qui est basé sur les prédictions des économistes du secteur privé, mais aussi un scénario pire, qui est basé sur la possibilité qu'on aura une situation économique pire au Canada et dans le monde. Et comme vous avez dit, oui, c'est écrit noir sur blanche. Pour être candide avec les Canadiens et aussi pour rassurer les Canadiens que dans tous les scénarios possibles, on est prêt. Je veux ajouter que personne ne sait précisément ce qui se passera dans l'économie mondiale. Quand on dit qu'il y a une période, que nous vivons dans une période d'incertitude, c'est une façon de dire que vraiment c'est difficile d'être certain de ce qui se passera. Mais je suis confiante que de tous les pays du monde, le Canada est vraiment dans la meilleure position. Nous avons une économie aujourd'hui qui est très forte. Nous avons eu dans cette année la croissance la plus forte dans le G7. Nous avons une position fiscale forte. Je ne peux pas dire précisément ce qui se passera l'année prochaine, mais je peux dire avec beaucoup de confiance que le Canada a les ressources, le Canada a les gens, le Canada a la position fiscale qui nous permettra de passer par cette situation difficile. Et après ça, je pense que nous sommes dans une période quand les opportunités de l'avenir, pour le Canada particulièrement, sont immenses. Sure. It's a really good question. And, you know, in the budget, we present two scenarios, our base case scenario and a downside scenario. Now, the base case scenario, as you guys know very well, is put together in what I consider to be an excellent, very Canadian way. Since 1994, it has been based on the average of the predictions of private sector economists. I think this is an example of great institutional stability of Canada. We did that survey in September. And as we were putting together the fall economic statement, we saw that some of the predictions of some people for where the world economy was going were getting a little bit worse, a little more negative. And so we thought it was appropriate to also present a downside scenario, which showed people how things would look if those more negative predictions do indeed come to pass. And I really believe people should take comfort from that downside scenario, because what that downside scenario shows is even if things are significantly worse than private sector economists were predicting when we surveyed them, Canada's fiscal position is absolutely sound, and Canada gets through this in really good shape. And then just the final thing I'll say is, you know, we talk a lot about how this is a time of economic uncertainty. What that really means is no one knows for sure what's going to happen. And that is just the reality. We really are living through an unprecedented set of economic events. And so anyone who tells you they know for sure what's going to happen, I would just immediately discount everything else they're going to say. But I can tell you one thing with really profound confidence, and that is that of all the countries in the world, Canada, there's no country that is better positioned than Canada to get through the global economic slowdown, which we're already experiencing. And there is no country better positioned than Canada to really thrive once we have worked our way through this slowdown. So I think we're really in the medium term, a moment of real optimism for our country. And, you know, we need to get through what's before us today and also be making some investments now that put us in a good position to seize that opportunity.
Okay, so we have time for a short question and a short answer, and the minister has to go in 2 minutes. So Glenn McGregor, you're next, CTV.
Minister, on the topic of windfalls, one of the rising costs that Canadians are struggling with are energy bills, I guess, in addition to cost of bacon. The UK and the European Union both have windfall taxes on these massive profits that energy companies are racking up. The head of Shell Oil last week, after another massive quarterly profit, admitted that's something they're going to have to deal with, that they should be paying more. You had an opportunity to do something on that today, to apply a windfall tax on oil and gas companies in the same way that your government already does on banks and insurance companies, but you didn't take it. Why won't you apply windfall tax to energy companies?
We think the appropriate additional tax measure is the one that you see in the fall economic statement, which is the tax on share buybacks. And yeah, we do, Glenn. Well, I think that is a very appropriate step because it sets up the right incentives. And what that tax does is create an incentive to do precisely what we want to see big Canadian companies doing. We want to see big Canadian companies taking their profits and investing them in the productive capacity of Canada and investing them in their workers. And that tax on share buybacks is designed to do precisely that. So I think it's a smart tax. It will raise some money for Canada, which is a good thing. But perhaps even more importantly, it creates the right set of incentives for companies to do the right thing.
Okay, thank you all. That ends today's press conference. Thank you, Minister. Appreciate your time.